Μπράβο, εσύ. Πέρα από όλα τα κανονίζια.
Γιατί εγώ μόλις τον είδα που ήρθε με αυτό, λέω τι είναι αυτό τώρα.
Ναι.
Νόμιζα ότι είναι ηχόμπαρα, πώς το λένε.
Σούπερ. Με πήρε ο τέτοιος.
Είναι σούπερ.
Τι πες?
Είναι σούπερ.
Τρελαίνεστε τώρα που δεν μπορείτε να δείτε τι έχουμε εδώ,
Δεν θα σου πω.
Τρελαίνομαι. Πολύ θα ήθελα να δω.
Γι' αυτό.
Α, τέλειο. Καινούριο.
Δανεικό, το έφερε ο κύριος Μαντήρας εδώ στην αίθουσα Αργυριάδη, το δανείζει για λίγο.
Πότε θα μας πάρετε ένα έτσι μικρόφωνο να έρχεται εδώ, να μιλάμε όπως θέλουμε, στο αμφιθέατρο?
Δεν σας χρειάζεται.
Ναι, σωστό είναι και αυτό. Με τον καιρό μιλάμε όλο και πιο δυνατά.
Μήπως μπορούμε να βάλουμε την κάμερα την άλλη, δεν μπαίνει.
Να βλέπει προς τα έξω η κυρία Χρήστου.
Ναι,
αυτό θα κάνω. Αυτό θα το κάνουμε, ναι, εντάξει.
Ναι, να βλέπω την αίθουσα, αν γίνεται, θα βοηθούσε.
Τόσο αεραστεχνικά. Πήγα να κάνω κάτι πιο...
Δεν έχει κάμερα άλλη. Πώς θα το ρίξει? Μόλις έβγαλε το καλό.
Κάνατε εσείς εχθές έτσι περιστροφή?
Όχι. Από την πάνω κάμερα δεν μπορούμε να βλέπουμε εδώ.
Η πάνω κάμερα
γράφει...
είναι του δικτύου.
Γράφει το YouTube.
Οκ, άρα δεν γίνεται.
Ναι. Δεν φτάνουν τα καλώδια για να το γυρίσω. Αυτό είναι το πρόβλημα, κυρία Χρήστου. Θα πρέπει να γυρίσουμε δεν έχει κάμερα εξωτερική το λάπτοπ, γι' αυτό. Εμείς σας βλέπουμε στη μεγάλη πίσω. Εδώ. Βλέπετε?
Α, μάλιστα. Ναι.
Εμείς. Αλλά... Πολύ ωραία. Ναι, πολύ ωραία φαίνεται και ακούγεται.
Κυρία Χριστού.
Μάλιστα, κύριε Σιμαντήρα.
Ζήτησε ο κύριος Δελακρουά πριν να αρχίσουμε να κάνει μια τοποθέτηση 10 λεπτών για να συνοψίσει τα χθεσινά συμπεράσματα και να κάνει γέφυρα στη σημερινή μέρα.
Εξαιρετικά. Πάρα πολύ ωραία. Ναι.
Αν είστε σύμφωνοι.
Πάρα πολύ ωραία, βέβαια.
Ωραία.
Βοηθάει πολύ αυτό.
Χαίρετε. Γεια σου, Αλεξάνδρε. Τι κάνεις? Καλά είσαι? Καλημέρα. Γίνεται? Όλα εντάξει? May I introduce you? Professor Linus Alexandros Sicilianos. Until September and August he was the dean of the faculty of law, and the former president of the European Court of Human Rights.
Germany is already onto this. I think I have been to the meeting.
Guy Delacroix is the
Καλημέρα κυρία Αντωνίου, σας άκουσα.
Σας ακούει από εδώ. Α, αλλά είναι φιλάκια. Καλή ευτυχία.
Καλημέρα σας. Όλα καλά κυρία Αντωνίου.
Δεν μου λες πού είσαι τώρα, Λοζάνη.
Είμαι στη Λοζάνη. Χθες είχαμε όλη μέρα συνεδρίαση. Πήγε πολύ καλά. Τώρα σήμερα το πρωί που σηκώ και εγώ δεν προλαβαίνω. Αλλά χθες ήδη είχε γίνει πολλή δουλειά.
Με το πανεπιστήμιο.
Καλά.
Με το πανεπιστήμιο είσαι εκεί.
Ναι, ναι, ναι.
Εράσμους.
Ήδης, ήδης,
Α, το Κίβις. Το Κίβις,
ήδης.
ωραία. Ωραία. Ωραία.
Γιατί η Λοζάνη δεν είναι στο Εράσμο.
Ναι, σωστό, σωστό. Μπράβο, μπράβο. Σε βλέπω υπτάμενη. Από τότε που... Ο υπτάμενος καθηγητής. Καλή διαμονή εκεί, έτσι. Καλή ευτυχία.
Όλο και περισσότερο. Εσείς πέστε, δεν ξέρω τώρα. Καλημέρα, Αλέξανδρε. Ακούω μια χαρά. Τι καλά που είστε
So you
εκεί.
can, okay, here you have your microphone.
So, good morning, my dear conference colleagues. I am very pleased to also welcome this morning the former President of the European Court of Justice of Human Rights, to give us the honor for his presence. And before the day yesterday is covered by other layers of thoughts and material. I'd just like to make a few comments, not to lose yesterday, and just to maybe also lay the ground for some interaction. Let me first say how much, my favorite model of communication is the symposion. Yes. And I think that should be also our future ambition, to come to that form of interaction, which has been so important in the development of Greek philosophy and, I suppose, so jurisprudence. We may not be able to lie down with each other as they did in the house of Agathon and Georgias, but I think it's one lesson for our next conference, that we must maybe leave more time for dispute and for interaction. So in that sense, I'd just like to make a few remarks about our session yesterday, which was so wonderfully opened by a paper, or rather, it was not a paper. He was talking without a paper, yes, on the ethos democracy. And the ethos democracy, well, is democracy an ethos? Unfortunately, I couldn't completely acoustically hear you, and probably I, as a simpleton, would have a problem to understand you anyway. But you do want me to be understood not only by philosophers, but also by the other more simple discipline. I'll give you one of my judicial papers and see if you understand it. Anyway, ethos democracy. And I think that concept, even though I proposed you exactly that title, I would maybe also add a question mark to it. Is ethos, is democracy a value? And I've read something in Robert Spemann. Yes, he said democracy is not a value in itself. And it's nonsense to talk of the European Union, Mr. President of the European Court of Human Rights, as a community of values. Yes, he says it's even dangerous. Now, we would have to go into Robert Spemann in detail to understand why he's saying that. But my remark would be, from the judicial constitutional point of view, that indeed democracy is not a value in itself. It is a form in which we can pursue to the best possible extent. And there's been no other solution offered by the state sciences and history. It is the vessel in which we do realize, to the best possible manner, values. It's that form. I think that completely, it does shift the attention, and it leaves open the consideration if maybe there are other forms of governance which also produce the common good. Yes, and because then we do realize, if that is the definition of democracy, we do realize that we are in competition. We are in competition because maybe democracy is not the only form of governance, but maybe not even the only good form of governance. An interesting remark, which I would like to simply register, is that you said, look here, I mean, in Plato's conception, what we have today is not democracy anyway. Yes, it's a mixture. Maybe mixture, since mixture is a sort of you put everything into one pot. I think we should maybe look at a sort of combination, or find a word for that combination of things. And that means maybe Plato would be much more pleased by our democracy as he was by the democracy in ancient Greece. Now, that's a long subject, but I think that's something to note. Well, maybe Plato and Cicero had this vision of the mixed form being the ideal form of government. An interesting consideration. I would, in a way, I'm sorry that you are using the term communitarism for something rejectable, because it borders in your political thinking on sectarianism, on particular, and I need that word actually for a form of governance in which the common good is the highest, has given the highest priority, even above things like individual freedoms, the common good. And I'd like to maybe hear from you, how do we call such a system of governance in which the common good, the future of mankind, the future of the planet, is the highest consideration? Yes? That is Republican? That's Republicanism. Okay. Well, I'm learning quickly. Yes. Now, from there, we move on to that wonderful speech by the former president of the Hellenic Republic, Prokopios Pavlopoulos, which was music in my ears, but only music because I couldn't understand his Greek. And I do hope to be able to read what he said. So it is very important to transcribe this and translate this so we can react to something authentic by a former president of the state, yes, and so it becomes part of our interaction and commentary. I think that's very important, and I think the very short paper which he distributed is not enough to understand what he actually had to say to us yesterday. Yes. So we do hope that we are able to sort of reconstruct this from the papers. From there, I do move on into our next session, and I say it was most impressive to see these pictures of the archaeological finds near Phaleron on the site of the Niarchos Foundation. Now, I do have my opinion about the Niarchos Foundation building. In former times, in ancient Greece, they called the cultural centers after the gods, Dionysos, yes? And only in Hellenistic times, in Roman times, did they start having Herodes Atticus Theatre and Philopappos Hill. So I do have my opinion. But anyway, that was a great lesson, but we'd also like to understand more deeply how those archaeological finds do tie in with concept of rule of law. What did actually happen to these poor people? Yes. From there, we move on to a common subject between you, Professor Dimopoulou, and Professor Schmitz, which was the Kleistenian reforms, Solonian and Kleistenian reforms. And I try to understand them from a legal point of view. And what happened that two men, yes, we read them like Solon and then Cleisthenes, were able to completely re-engineer and redesign a society. Yes? And that's unprecedented and unrepeated in history, and that a single person, or two times, and maybe we can also add Ephialtes and Pericles, yes, to it, were able to re-engineer a society. And that very complicated diagram of the Kleistenian reforms, yes, how could somebody shift the population from Themis to Philes and back again? And that has to be understood on. They must have based their power, their empowerment, on a very important consensus in their society. Otherwise, that would not have worked. Yes, and I think to explore this idea of the Solonian and Kleistenian, etc., reforms I think, remains important to see the background of it and the sociological, socio-political circumstances. We said we called the speech of Professor Schmitz a question mark, a Betriebsunfall der Geschichte, a road accident of history. And I don't know, did you answer the question? Well, I would say yes, probably it was. Yes, probably, certainly, there was no master plan in Solon's mind or in Cleisthenes' mind to develop the Greek polis into a democracy. It didn't occur to them, but what happened is that the result was something which they had not originally in their mind. Well, that's what could be called, if not a Betriebsunfall, but certainly a road accident, something which is an accidental but very useful result, of course. And it is also quite remarkable how an aristocracy, in order to survive with their influence as an aristocracy, was able to reform a society in good time so as to prevent a rebellion by the people. Yes, it was an alliance of aristocracy and of the people, and we know the Solonian alliance didn't last for very long because the people deserted him and more or less supported, certainly in parts, Pisistratum, probably not doing quite well under the Pisistratids. So that's another consideration. Societies or elites reacting in good time to reform society. And that capacity of the Athenian aristocracy is one of the keys to understand the origins and the emergence of democracy. So this is what I have to say. I think in the afternoon then it was quite fascinating to listen to Professor Dengelmann and his analysis of public spaces as being an important framework of democracy. Yes, and of course from there, and you have done a splendid demonstration in explaining this, and how do we sort of tie this in with the needs of our democracy and the public spaces which we need in order for democracy to persist. Yes, the reconstruction of public spaces is very important, but we are making a beginning here because we are not many, but it's still a public space. So what we all have to go for is, I think, a continuation and of our process. I would like, we've just briefly discussed this, how important it is to tie in other legal and constitutional cultures. Yes, for example, the wonderful thinking of in which you find in Britain on antiquity. Yes, and which is different, very different from the continental tradition. That's one thing, and we have just had an idea how this could happen, actually. What we certainly need in terms of is a major comment of that size. Yes, you see the little temple which I've built this morning of his books. Yes, a temple of commentary, a temple for understanding from our point of contemporary relevance the importance of the ancient Greek democracy. When you go into a bookshop in Germany and you ask, or into the library, university library, I want something which is called ancient and modern democracy, what they will give you is this. Yes, and that's all. That's practically all. Jochen Bleichen has published something else, which is also a paperback. Yes, I very much appreciate the work by Jochen Bleichen and the wonderful way in which he's writing, but we must have more than this to say about ancient and modern democracy. This is just a compilation of text with an introduction. Yes, this is not an analysis, but that's the only thing which at this stage is on the German market. So this is the ambition in an architectural sense. I think, have I been within my 10 minutes, and I should no longer stay in the way, but that's something which I wanted to say about yesterday, and I hope it will maybe bring our discussion a little. I forgot something important. I forgot our evening. I forgot Star Trek. And there's something to say about Star Trek. If we consider Star Trek to be a reflection in art, in the dramatic arts, of what is happening, for example, that dilemma, this aporie between non-interference and humanitarian intervention, which you developed in Star Trek, in the Star Trek tradition, that of course was a reflection of the non-interference principle of the United Nations and of the humanitarian interference theory which we saw put to work in Kosovo. Yes, and so and we find very much the sort of same art of reflection in the classical tragedies and also comedies, I should add. Yes, which and in a wonderful way Christian Meyer develops this idea. So there is a parallel, but are modern arts up to the same standard of philosophical reflection, as was the Greek tradition of tragedy and comedies as well. That's the standard we should look up to, that arts and the dramatic world sort of reflect our societal conflicts and apores in the same way as. But that was a very important contribution, and I'd like to thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Professor Spiridon. Good morning. Vlachopoulos for hosting a wonderful dinner in the University Club, which was delicious and delightful. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear participants, colleagues, and friends, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Delacroix, for the very useful points that help us continue with part 4. They function as a bridge for today's topics. Part 4 is the topic of part 4 are institutions of Athenian democracy, and I would like to welcome Professor Vasiliki Christou. It's a very big honor for us that you are participating from Switzerland, where you also take part at another international conference. So thank you very much for that. Professor Christou is an assistant professor of constitutional law at the University of Athens. She completed her undergraduate studies at the University of Athens and her graduate studies in Germany at the University of Heidelberg, both with distinction. She has visited the University of Cambridge as a visiting college research associate. She has worked as a tutor of American constitutional law in Heidelberg, an academic assistant at the University of Mannheim, and is now working at our law school as a professor for constitutional law. Her areas of interest are constitutional law, human rights, theory of rights, comparative public law and European institutions, and her today's speech will be about deliberative institutions of the Athenian democracy. Professor Vasiliki Christou.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleague Nikos, for this introduction to myself. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this conference for the invitation, and especially Professor Vlachopoulos. I'm very happy to be there, even in a virtual form. I am indeed in the University of Lausanne right now, taking part in a series program, but I would certainly also love to be there with you. Now, as you can see in the program, the topic of my speech is about deliberative institutions in the Athenian democracy. I'm not a historian or a historian of law, so my perspective would be from the point of view of a constitutional law scholar, how the institutions of the Athenian democracy worked, how they cooperated with each other, their institutional engineering, let's say, and we explore that, I explore that, because we certainly want to make some conclusions about today, or see what can we be taught about today's democracy. So, the Athenian democracy is nowadays looked up because of the possibilities it offers to all Athenian citizens to participate in the exercise of public power. What is plausibly always emphasized is the element of radical and direct public participation. In other words, the participatory element is emphasized, and then the liberative element probably comes second. However, deliberation, and I mean by that an organized discussion led by reason or innovation, is what the Athenian democracy and today's representative, specifically parliamentary democracy, have in common. And this is what I want to draw your attention to with this presentation. Therefore, in my presentation, I have chosen to lay emphasis on the deliberative element and, in fact, not the deliberation in the ecclesia, the demos, because this would be very obvious, but on other deliberative institutions that would either help or prepare deliberation in the demos, or even impose effective limitations on the power and the sovereignty of the people. I would like to refer to three institutions in particular. First, the Council of the 500 Bills. Second, the so-called Graphi Paranormal. And third, the Areopagus. The Council of the 500 was created by Clisthenes. Prior to Clisthenes, there was the Council of the 400, but Clisthenes reformed it in a very significant way, as I shall explain, and raised the number of its members to 500. The English literature uses the term council to describe this institution. However, the ancient Greek term is voulion, which is the term used until today for a parliament. This is no coincidence, I believe. The idea of organized and reasoned deliberation had always been framed under this word, voulion or parliament. In other words, in the Athenian direct democracy, a body of a parliament, a voulion, did exist, and it also enjoyed significant authorities, both legislative as well as executive, fiscal, and relating to the treasury. The Parliament of the 500 was, among other things, responsible to prepare the bills requested by the demos. This voulion, this parliament, had to prepare the so-called probuletum, and each time a member of the parliament called vouleupes that day, and this is how we still call our MPs, had to introduce a vouleupes, a member of the parliament, had to introduce the probuletum, the motion, to the demos. This parliament at some point lost legislative initiative. Legislative initiative lied exclusively to the demos. However, the parliament had to prepare the motion to be debated. Without this preparation, without the drafting of this motion, discussion in the ecclesia would be non-conclusive and chaotic. The parliament, itself a deliberative institution, held deliberation in the ecclesia of the demos. The role of the parliament, of this voulion of the 500, is sometimes in contemporary perceptions of the Athenian democracy not emphasized, which as a consequence reproduces an unrealistic perception of a direct democracy in which the demos is responsible for literally everything. A body with the features of a demos can certainly not draft a bill. It can debate on it, reject it, or accept it, but it cannot draft it. Also, I have to stress that this parliament sat every day, except in festivals, whereas after the reform of Clisthenes, ecclesias sat 11 times a year. All important decisions were taken by the ecclesia, and Clisthenes indeed widened the powers of the ecclesia. But the latter was effectively assisted as regards everyday government by a number of institutions, one of them being the Parliament of the 500. What is also very important is that this Parliament, as reformed by Christianis, embodied an element of geographical representation, while it weakened the element of representation by origin. This Parliament, it is believed, was representative of the communities of Athens. Christianis introduces the practice of describing a citizen by the name of his deme, his community, as a substitute for the previous custom of just adding his father's name after his own name. Reference to the father's name revealed possibly a noble origin, and also made clear who is a new citizen and who an old one. Because, in fact, the administrative reforms of Christianis were supporting the policy, his policy of enfranchisement, of accepting new citizens. In other words, Christianis expanded the demos and renamed the Athenian citizens. Aristotle in the Politics says that Christianis admitted to the tribes of Athens, the Philes, many foreigners and Slavic native people. This means that the latter must have been former slaves who, on their emancipation, received the status of native. Let us take a closer look on the administrative reforms of Christianis because they are essential in understanding the composition of the Parliament of the 500 and what these members of the Parliament represented. Christianis replaced the ancient four Attic tribes, also existing in the times of Solon, with 10 new tribes. Each of the 10 new tribes was composed of 3 tritias selected by lot from the 3 groups of the different regions of Athens. The first group was the town, the Asti. The second was the coast, Parandi. And the third, there were the inland regions, Mesolia. In the town, you could find more nobles. In the coast, you could find more merchants. And in the inland region, more farmers. So, by assigning 3 tritias, one of each of the areas of Athens in a tribe, Christianis was unifying the body politic beyond social classifications. Also, Christianis endeavored to make the new tribes equal not only in geographical area, but also in the population. This is important because each tribe was to enjoy equal participation in the Parliament of the 500. Each tribe could participate in the Parliament with a tribal group of 50 members, which were most likely chosen by lot among those who applied to serve this public duty. Their term was annually renewed. Through re-election, though re-election was permitted, the second term was never continuous with the first, and appointment for a third term was absolutely prohibited. The members of the Parliament came, at least up to a certain time, from the 3 upper classes of the Athenian democracy, the Tetracosyometimni, the Hippis, and the Septimides. Also, a member of this Parliament had to be over 13 years of age. Each tribal group served in turn for a 10th part of the year as a business committee of the demos. During this period, they were called Pritanis, and each of the periods was a Prytani. The Pritanis had a president, Epistatis, who was chosen again by lot from the Pritanis, and it was changed every day. He presided over the meeting of the Parliament, which had a session every day, and also acted as president of the Ecclesia of the Demos, if it met during his day of office. To sum up, this parliament, this we of the 500, representative of the communities of all three areas of Athens, was responsible for the drafting of the legislation and any other motion in parliament. A member of this parliament acted as a president of the ecclesia of the Demos, and also this parliament prepared the agenda for the sittings of the ecclesia, which is also a very significant part. The parliament had wide executive powers, especially fiscal ones, and in conclusion, this council, this Voulis or parliament, with this function, was intent to strike a reasonable compromise between the growing insistence of the Demos for full sovereignty and a steady and intelligent control of a deliberative institution which was also representative of the communities of Athens. I now pass to the second institution, which I think served as a limitation to the absolute power of the Demos. In this regard, I want to stress the importance of the so-called graphi paranomon, which, from a contemporary point of view and with an amount of exaggeration, of course, it is often parallel to constitutional review. Graphi paranomon meant that anyone could challenge a decision or a motion of the ecclesia or the Voulis of the 500 in front of the courts if he believed that it was against the laws or some general principles of law in the broadest sense. The binding of the Demos upon certain decisions was not something unknown in ancient Athens. We must not forget that Solon pledged the Athenians with an oath to maintain his laws for 1 decade. Graphi paranomon meant that any citizen could object to a motion proposed in the parliament of the 500 or in the ecclesia on the ground that it was invalid in form or contrary to an existing law in substance. The objection could be raised before or after the voting and took the form of a sworn statement that this citizen intended to bring a graphi paranomon to the courts, most likely to the Irea, but some say also to the Areopagus, against the one proposing the motion. After such an objection was raised, the vote, if not yet taken, was postponed, and the proposal, if already carried, was suspended until the question had been decided in the courts. If the one that had proposed the law was condemned, then this proposal lapsed, and he was sentenced to a fine. Re-condemnations on discharge entailed loss of civic rights. Graphi paranomon is very important for two reasons, at the least. First, it showed that the motions of the Demos or the parliament were subject to judicial review, in fact, to an abstract form of judicial review. This is clearly a restraint of sovereignty. Second, it shows that anyone proposing a motion before the Demos or the parliament did so responsibly. He knew that he could be fined for proposing something inappropriate, or even worse, he could be expelled from the body politic. In other words, graphi paranomon was an institution of accountable citizens, embedded in a system of radical democracy as a check and balance. Third, I would like to refer to the institution of the Areopagus. According to some commentators, Areopagus, being a relic of the ancient regime, was not very popular among the Athenians. However, Aristotle writes that during the Persian Wars, Areopagus had regained prestige because it had effectively and financially helped the Athenian citizens. In fact, Themistocles himself came from the body of the Areopagus, and it was not until the radical reforms of Epictetus that Areopagus was deprived of its administrative powers. Again, I believe it is no coincidence that both Solon and Aristotle refer to Areopagus as the bull, the parliament of Areopagus, because Areopagus was also determined to function by reasoned deliberation. Actually, at an earlier stage of the Athenian constitution, the Areopagus is thought to have been the one to prepare the bills in parliament, the probulegma, to exercise this probuleptic authority later entrusted to the Council of War. Nowadays, we tend to think of Areopagus as a judicial body. In fact, the name Arios Pagus goes back to the myth of the trial of the god Ares, taking place near a rock under this name near Acropolis. Ares was facing the charges that he had murdered Poseidon's son, Aireotheus. Today, the highest court for civil and criminal litigation has the same name, Areopagus. However, if we look back at the history of the synonymous institutions of ancient regimes, we shall find out that it was, at first initially, a body with both administrative and judicial authority. Areopagus was an aristocratic institution, an institution of the nobility, and it is considered to have predated the laws of Critical. In the ancient regime, Areopagus was a council of the elderly that assisted the king in various areas of the exercise of his power, administrative, religious, and judicial. The members of Areopagus came initially from the 9 magistrates after termination of their term. The 9 magistrates have been elected on the basis of their aristocratic origin and their wealth. Later on, under Solon's laws, Areopagus was considered to be the guardian of all laws. This function is known under the Greek word nomothiarchia, which resembles the way we perceive today the role of the highest or even constitutional courts. Aristotle states that in Solon's time, Areopagus supervised the functioning of administration, and it also had the right to prosecute and to impose fines or other penalties. It deposited the fines in the treasury without providing a reason for their imposition. Even after Areopagus had lost many of its powers due to the gradual democratization of the Athenian constitution, this Athenian court continued to try serious cases of homicide with intent, bodily harm with lethal intent, poisoning, arson, and destruction of the sacred olive trees. And it was always a very esteemed court, which was thought to do justice to the citizens. To conclude with, what I have tried to show is that the Athenian democracy was a structural democracy. Unfortunately, today's average perception of a direct democracy is that of an unorganized democracy, where every citizen with no other affiliations, no other bindings to a party, to a community, without reference to any other deliberative sphere, decides or casts a vote. In my analysis, I have tried to stress that the Ecclesia of the Demos had wider powers and it did decide about the most important things, but it was supported by a number of other institutions who would help it exercise its powers, but also restrain it from abuses or uncontemplated decision making. This teaches us today that democracy, any type of democracy, is indeed, it lives by the functioning of multiple deliberative spheres, but form a network, in our days escalating to the highest deliberative institution, a parliament. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your speech. Will you stay with us for the discussion? Okay, so we can move on. I will now call Professor Spiridon Vlachopoulos for his speech. Professor Vlachopoulos is professor for public law and especially constitutional law at the Law School of University of Athens. He has studied law at the University of Athens and made his PhD research at the Law School of the University of Munich in Germany. His areas of interest are constitutional law, fundamental rights, political and constitutional history. He has written several books. I counted 13. Maybe I missed one, but I think it's 13 till today. He has also other activities, scientific activities. He's a member of the Greek Data Protection Authority, of the Academic Board of the Academy of Transparency and Human Rights for Good Governance of the European Public Law Organization. He is the president of the Commission for the Assessment of the Quality of Lawmaking Processes, and he is also a member of the Administrative Board of the University of Athens. We are very lucky to have him as an organizer and participant of our conference, and I think it's fair to say that he's one of the most prominent constitutional lawyers in our country.
I feel very lucky, Nikos. Good morning, everyone, to have colleagues like you, like Vasiliki, and I have to say I'm also very lucky to participate to this conference and having contributed to this conference with the help of Guy, because I think it's a very important conference, which perhaps should be continued, perhaps in Athens, in Greece, in Germany, in another place. But I mean, the problematic in Strasbourg, perhaps where the European Court of Human Rights also is, because I think this problematic democracy in modern times and in all times is one of the fundamentals of our law civilization. So now let's come to my presentation. The subject of my presentation is legislator by lot. That means sortition parliaments where the members of the parliaments are not elected but selected by lot. And I think this subject is perhaps a little bit may arise some surprise. But let's go to the roots, and let's go to ancient Greece, because it is well known that in ancient Greece, the birth giver, of course, of democracy, the members of the governmental, parliamentary, and judicial bodies were not elected, but in the most times selected by lot. So, more precisely, in ancient Athens, not only the 5,000 judges of Iliea, that was the highest court of Athens, but also the 500 members of the parliament were elected, designated by lot. 1/3 of all Athenian citizens above 30 years of age had served in the parliament at least once in their lifetime during the 25 years before the Peloponnesian Wars, and no one could be chosen for more than 2 times in their lifetime. Only the generals and the clerks were elected by the General Assembly of the Athenians. This is the so-called Ecclesia του Δήμου. And as far as the ancient political theory is concerned, Aristotle, in his The Politics, Politica, insisted that it is accepted as democratic when public offices are allocated by lot. So democracy was to choose the parliamentarians by lot, and as oligarchic when they are filled by elections. So elections were considered to be oligarchic according to Aristotle. And furthermore, according to Plato, democracy arises after the poor are victorious over their adversaries. Then they share out equally with the rest of the population political offices and burdens. And in this regime, public offices are usually allocated by lot. So Plato was in accordance with Aristotle. Procedures of various forms through which public officers were elected by lot, selected by lot, can also be found in several places and after the Athenian democracy, for example in Italy, Lombardy, Venice, Florence, and also in the Middle Ages. But let's now move to the present. You all know Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan was the former General Secretary of the United Nations. What did Kofi Annan say? He said that let's introduce the ancient Greek practices of selecting parliaments by lot instead of elections. So Kofi Annan said to the states of the United Nations to introduce legislature by lot. In his view, such a system would prevail the formation of self-serving and self-perpetuating political classes disconnected from their electorates. Moreover, several movements in favor of sortition parliaments have appeared inter alia in the United Kingdom, in the United States, and also in Canada. There is also a sortition foundation following the motto, let's do democracy differently. Let's do democracy better. And this foundation insists on the sortition parliament. Especially after the recent economic crisis, the movement demanding a sortition democracy has increased. The concept of democracy and the different ways of implementing democracy is a central theme of a discussion in social movements. In Iceland, in 2009, there was an unsuccessful attempt to draft the new constitution by assemblies, the members of which were not elected but selected by lot. Nevertheless, the same attempt in Ireland was more successful. In 2012, 67% of the members of the Constitutional Convention were citizens randomly selected from the electoral register. The Constitutional Assembly is considered as successful and progressive, I have to say, not conservative, and one of the proposals of this assembly, the legalization of same-sex marriage, was adopted by a referendum some years after in Ireland. The same experiment, this time in a more revolutionary form, was repeated in Ireland in 2017 to 2018, and the Constitutional Convention was entirely selected by lot. So this is the situation. Now, we have to face the problematic of legislator by lot and of sortition parliaments, and we have to answer the question, should we follow the model of ancient Greece? Should we introduce a sortition parliament? Of course, like in every topic, there are arguments in favor and against a sortition parliament. Let's now examine first the advantages, the possible advantages of a sortition parliament, and then the disadvantages of a sortition parliament. We have to admit that people in the modern democracies, especially after the economic and pandemic crisis of the last decades, need something new. We need something new in our democracy. Everything new seems to be good, at least at the beginning, of course. This is of great importance because of the skepticism and disbelief of the citizens against the classic parliamentary system. There is a disbelief of the citizens against the classic parliamentary system. One could argue that people are tired of the parliamentary system and they need a new element in the state organization which will now strengthen the democratic conscience of the citizens. Moreover, by the eventual introduction of a sortition parliament, some people who don't actually have the opportunity to become members of the parliament could now obtain opportunity to become parliamentarians in the future. This point is also very important because they are efficient people who are willing to participate into the political life but they don't do it because they don't have the money, they don't finance the electoral campaign, or they are not affiliated to the political party. Nowadays, if you are not affiliated to a political party, practically you don't have any chance to become member of the parliament. It is commonly known that the independent members of the parliament who do not belong to a political party are very few. And in some parliaments, like the Greek parliaments, do not even exist. Consequently, the introduction of a sortition parliament can be also seen as a matter of enforcement of the equality principle. All citizens will have the same chance to become members of the parliament of the legislative body. At the same time, the selection by lot increases the diversity and the representativeness of the legislative body. In this context, one could also argue that the sortition parliament is composed by people who feel that they are executing a public service duty in the genuine sense of the word, and they are not acting as professionals. The fact also that they are not interested to be re-elected means that they are willing to take the difficult but necessary decisions in favor of the public good, even against the will of the voters. Members of the parliament selected by lot are also more probable to think and act out of the box, and less traditionally, finding new solutions for old problems. In this sense, the sortition parliament could also act as an antidote to populism. After all these arguments, it is not surprising that according to an analysis of Italian researchers, the sortition parliament is more effective than the elected parliament. This major effectiveness of the sortition parliament can also be explained with the abolishment of the affiliation of its members to the political parties. The members of the elected parliament have to be loyal to the party, to the political party, and especially to its leader, if they want to participate to the next elections as candidates of the political party. As far as the members of the parliament of the governing party are concerned, they have to obey the will of the prime minister if they want to become ministers. After all that, it is evident that the members of the parliament are not actually free, and that constitutional provisions, like the constitutional provision of Article 60, paragraph 1 of the Greek Constitution, according to which members of the parliament enjoy unrestricted freedom of opinion and right to vote according to their consciences, do not represent the political reality. The counter-argument that the essence of the representative democracy through the sortition parliament is lost and replaced by pure luck can be refuted by observing that the modern democracy was never really representative. Only the wealthiest and the most educated people normally have the opportunity to become members of the parliament. Moreover, it is well known that some professions, for example, lawyers, medical doctors, engineers, and other professions are overrepresented in the modern parliaments, while other professions, for example, farmers, are underrepresented. It is also important to note that even today, in some countries, women are underrepresented in the national parliaments, and a very characteristic example is the Greek parliament, where in the elections of July 2019, only 63 out of the 300 members of the Greek parliament were women. Now, these are the advantages, let's say, of the sortition parliament. Now, let's move to the other side of the coin and see the possible disadvantages of the sortition parliament. The main disadvantage of the sortition parliament is the lack of accountability. The members of this parliament, the sortition parliament, are not obliged to account to their actions for their actions, like the members of the elected parliament to their voters. Consequently, the only limit to the behavior of the members of the sortition parliament is the law. and only the law. The member of such a parliament would be allowed to do anything which is not contrary to the law. The other limitations which exist in the modern parliaments, representative democracies, and decrease the danger of the abuse of power, for example, mass media, public opinion, other political parties, do not fit into the scheme of the sortition parliament. Furthermore, because the selection as a member of a sortition parliament is a pure matter of luck, of course, it is probable that the sortition parliament would be composed by totally indifferent or, let's say, inefficient people, or by citizens who do not possess the necessary skills in order to perform the duty of a parliamentarian. It is very characteristic that even in ancient Greece, the officials selected by lot had to undergo an examination, dokimasia. We have heard yesterday about dokimasia, in order to reaffirm that the randomly selected officials were capable of serving the duty of the parliamentarian. But if we introduced such an examination as a corrective, then the essence of the system of selecting officials by lot would be lost. Apart from that, such an examination opens a wide range of questions concerning, for example, the content of the examination and who is going to undertake this examination. It is also well known that in ancient Greece, some of the most important public offices, for example, military commanders, clerks, were excluded by the sortition procedure, and according to Xenophon, Socrates taught his companions to despise the established laws by insisting on the folly of appointing public officials by lot, when none would choose a pilot or builder or flautist by lot. So why should we choose the parliamentarians by lot? The modern parliaments have decisive powers over vital public matters, like their power to declare the country under martial law. Is this compatible with the selection of the members of the parliament through pure luck, which can lead to the nomination of eventually inefficient or indifferent people? So, under a more general point of view, it can be argued that the replacement of the classic model of the parliament of representative democracy through a sortition parliament can decrease the interest of the public for a political life, since the possibilities for citizens to be selected by lot nowadays are very few, contrary, of course, to the situation in ancient Greece, where there was a remarkable smaller number of citizens. Moreover, the sortition parliament would lead to the end of the political parties and of the ideologies which are represented by them. Our modern parliamentary democracy is based on the political parties, which are quite often the object of a very strong critic, like in the interwar period. As well, in the modern times, the political parties are accused for every negative symptom of the governmental system. This is correct, but nevertheless, nothing else until now is presented as a real alternative to the political parties. Everyone accuses the political parties, but when the question comes, which is the alternative to the political parties, then no one presents an alternative to the political parties. This is the difficult question, of course. Despite the disadvantages of the political parties and the problem of the democratic deficit of these parties concerning their organization, it cannot be denied that the political parties, by uniting the people with the same ideology or interests, strengthen, of course, the political homogeneity. On the contrary, heterogeneity can difficult in the composition of difficult attitudes and different attitudes and interests represent a main disadvantage of a randomly selected, chaotic, let's say, parliament. This will possibly lead to the serious possibility of governmental instability, which will eventually turn to the instability of the whole political system. More generally, the introduction of a sortition parliament could lead to the farewell of the main features and advantages of the parliamentary system as this was formed in the modern times. But according to my point of view, the main disadvantages, the main difficulty with the sortition parliament is the fact that I think I'm not quite sure if the sortition parliament fit to the idea of democracy. It can be quite controversial if this system, where the legislators are selected by lot and not elected by the people, is compatible with the modern notion of democracy. Democracy means that the political system, according to which means the political system, according to which people, or at least the majority of them, rule. In a system of sortition parliament, the will of the people does not rule. It is not the will of the people. It's pure luck, the only decisive factor. Already in ancient times, Isocrates had pointed out that appointing magistrates through elections was also more democratic than the casting of lots, since under the plan of election by lot, chance would decide the issue, and the partisans of oligarchy would often get the offices. Now, let's come to a conclusion. What is the conclusion? What is the possible conclusion? Because I have listed the advantages and disadvantages of the sortition parliament. I think perhaps the time has come to think out of the box. Not in the meaning that we should abolish the representative democracy and substitute democracy, the classic representative democracy, by a random democracy, where the members of the one and only parliament will be designated by lot. But in the meaning that we could perhaps combine the advantages of the classic representative democracy with the advantages of the sortitionary parliament, with small and gradual doses of alternative models. For example, with a second legislative body, the numbers of which will be chosen by lot and will have only advisory competencies. After all, perhaps it would not be a bad idea to introduce a system which would combine the advantages of both parliaments, elected and sortition parliament. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vlachopoulos. We have now space and time for our discussion. So, Professor Dimopoulou, you have a question. Thank you very much, Mr. Delacroix.
This time it can be very short. If I understand it correctly, the ecclesia was the people. We know it excluded many other human beings, like women and slaves, like foreigners, but in principle, the ecclesia was the people. Yes? So, if the ecclesia voted on a draft of the bull, the decision then taken by the ecclesia had the character of a referendum by the people. Yes? And that brings us to an interesting model for possible reform. How about people voting on laws, not every law maybe, on certain laws which have been passed by parliaments? Because what we think of referendum until now is this initiative by the people. They may be very wild and chaotic, but this would be a structured process of bringing the will of the people to bear. And this is what I'd like to just note as one additional possible role model of the people and parliament.
Thank you very much, Professor Karabellas.
Thank you very much for the two very interesting presentations. I completely agree with Professor Christian's arguments on the nature of the democratic nature also of Athenian institutions. I want just to add Professor Lacopoulos'
think it's a legitimate question. Okay, thank you very much. Other questions or remarks or comments before we open the floor again? Okay. So, Professor Vasiliki Christou, would you like to answer to the comments or to make a final statement?
Yes, thank you very much. Um, Unfortunately, I could not hear some of the speakers, uh, but I could hear, I think, most of them. So, if I'm not able to answer something, perhaps you can tell me if there is any other question to address. Um, I think it was also mentioned in the presentation of Professor Vlachopoulos, and then Professor Dimopoulou commented on it. I think it's very important, this process of diplomacia, which I did not mention, but it is it's very correct and true what Professor Dimopoulou said, that he was also attending the parties. And I think it enforces this idea that uh, being a democracy was not some sort of an unstrained democracy. There were some procedures, even if they are different from today. Uh, there were some procedures so that not everything is left to 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 luck or to the will of the mob. Let's say it was not a mob because there was deliberation at all levels. And I also found um, uh, the comparison between Sulpician Parliament and election Parliament very, very interesting for Professor Vlachopoulos. And actually, I think this discussion about Athenian institutions are always in the debate again and again because apart from the cultural influence of the ancient world to modern Europe in general, and of course Greece, but also Europe. We tend to go back to these institutions because we want to um, correct some flaws, let's say, or some disadvantages of representative democracy. Uh, it's not about abolishing representative democracy. Such discussions are not uh, serious or well-founded, I think, but it is about uh, making it better, improving it, in the sense that uh, it should open more opportunities for participation and for dialogue. So this is why we keep going back to these ancient institutions and to also um, founding ourselves, perhaps some institutions by lot which will have not the authorities of a parliament, but some more limited authorities. As I pointed out also in my presentation, the, the demos did not have fiscal powers, for example. Um, so I think this whole conference and this discussion we had today is very useful under this perspective. So my perspective was to say that you cannot go to more direct forms of participation without deliberation. This is like suicide for the political system in democracy. And this is why I have stressed the element of deliberation. Professor Vlachopoulos, on the other hand, uh, pointed exactly our main concern nowadays, that the political system ought to be more open to the public. And we're actually in search of new models and new institutions of this to regulate or to achieve this openness. also by going back to democracy.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Vlachopoulou.
Yes.
Ναι.
Well, many thanks for the very interesting remarks. Well, first of all, about the remarks of Professor Dimopoulou, you are totally correct. There were in ancient Greece many ways and many mechanisms in order to correct the disadvantages of selecting the people by lot. Okay, and I think it was positive that they were selected only the people who declared themselves willing to participate to the procedures. About the dokimasia, I have to say that I am very skeptic, because I think that the dokimasia was actually a more oligarchic element feature in the whole system, because someone else decided over the quality of the person who would undertake the duty. So especially today, if the dokimasia, the examination, is something which fits to the notion of democracy, I'm also very skeptical, because the decisive question is who is going to undertake the dokimasia, who is going to be the examinator, and which is the content of the dokimasia. I think dokimasia nowadays is something, or interview, let's say, it's some kind sort of interview. It's something which fits when we have to select the people who are going to lead the divisions of a ministry, but not to undertake public duties such as being a member of the parliament. So, Guy, I think, said that we have some alternatives in order to renew our democracy. And the point of my intervention was to stress out that we have to find solutions, because the democracy, the parliamentary democracy we know, it's decreasing. This is something we have to admit. If we gather here and say, oh, our democracy is the best system and everything is well and everything is done, then I think we have no topic to discuss about it. Yeah? And for example, Greece is a very characteristic example. When I was young, about 80% of the voters took part to the elections, to the parliamentary elections. I think in June of 2024, the percentage of the voters who took part to the elections for the members of the European Parliament, Greek members of the Parliament, was about 40%, something like that. And it was not people who were indifferent in the political life. There were people who said, I had enough, I don't want to participate to this thing. I don't want any more members of the European Parliament who are actors, actresses, football players, except if they are football players of Olympiacos Piraeus, of course. But nevertheless, I think we have reached a point where we have to think about our democracy. And we have to face the reality that the people are not anymore interested in this thing, what we call democracy and parliamentary procedures. This is something we have to discuss very seriously. And I totally agree with Dr. Karambelas. I think lot was a core of ancient times. Nowadays, the core of the modern society is lottery, not lot. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Fortunately, our timetable is quite comfortable, so I think we can move on to the next two speeches. First,
I have to
yes.
unfortunately. Thank you very much for this panel, and I wish you the best of success to the rest
Thank you.
of the conference.
Best
Thank
of
you very much.
success to you as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Then with 1 vote to 0 votes, we decide a 5-minute break. Yes. μιλήσετε διαδοχικά με τον κύριο Καράμπελα. Διαδοχικά με τον κύριο Καράμπελα. Ή... Επειδή έχετε κοινό θέμα, νομίζω. Um, After our 5 minute break of 15 minutes, we can move on with our interdisciplinary approach. Now we have two economists who prepared a paper that will be presented by Professor Kyriazis. The paper has been written by, is a joint paper of Professor Kyriazis and Professor Economou. Professor Kyriazis is a professor, has been a professor in the economics department of the University of Thessaly in central Greece. He studied, his PhD research was at also in Germany at the University of Bonn, the economics department, and he has been a visiting professor in Harvard and Trier. He has contributed numerous papers to international academic journals, over 300 press articles, and also 16 novels, one of which, if I understood correctly yesterday, is a joint piece of art with Mr. Delacroix. In 2005, the President of the French Republic has honored him with the award of the Knight of the Legion of Honor for his contributions to European ideals. And today's speech is about direct democracy in ancient and modern times.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So now you'll see how economists think about ancient Greek institutions in the economy. And as you know, economists like to measure things. So what we'll try to do in the first part of our paper or presentation is to try to make a presentation of how we could measure actually and give ranks to democracies to see how democratic a regime, a political or a country is or not. And this will be done according to some criteria which are evolved from ancient classical democracy. The first, the argument or the axiom from which we begin is the following. A state is the more democratic, the more citizens participate in decision making. This is the axiom from which we begin. As you understand, for example, a dictatorship takes a ranking of 0 because there is no participation of citizens in decision making. Now, we have 5 criteria which we take from ancient democracy and which we will apply also to modern democracies in order to make this ranking. The first criterion is isonomia. It is equality in front of the law, one of the pillars of ancient democracy, and as many of our colleagues mentioned also yesterday, a very important criterion which existed even before the actual emergence of democracy in classical Athens. So isonomia is something which was a little bit more ancient. You could say that it existed perhaps a little bit even during Dracon's times, certainly during Solon's times, and so on. What does it mean? Equality before the law, I think it's, everybody understands it. And I must point out also that all these criteria from the ancient Greek start with a very new, at the time, word, which is isos, equal. So we have isonomia, equality in front of the law. Isokratia, I will explain later what it is. Isigoria, isopolitia. All of them begin with this isos. So you see how important it is, this equality in all the criteria. And we could even say a little bit an exaggeration that these were the magical new words of democracy, which did not exist before. So, isonomia, equality in front of the law. In ancient Greece, in ancient classical Athens, it was valid 100%. Everybody was equal in front of the law. How is it with today's democracies? I'll say an example for Greece. We have a very particular law which says that members of parliament and ministers cannot be accused for negligence, fraud, or whatever unless the parliament, in a majority, frees them and denies them their parliamentary asylum. So even for the same, let's say, problem, fraud or whatever, and so on, if one person who is, let's say, a civil servant but not a parliamentarian, he is accused normally, the parliamentarian who has done the same fraud, let's say, with the civil servant, is not able or will not be prosecuted unless the parliament gives the right for him to be prosecuted. So in this case, I don't know how it is in Germany or in Austria, but in this case, you see that in modern Greece, isonomia is not applied fully. So if you give a ranking of 1, which is the highest for ancient classical Athens, for Greece, modern Greece, you would give something less, whatever you like, 0.8, 0.7, or whatever. Second, isokratia. Isokratia in ancient Greece, in classical Athens, meant that all public services were open and public posts were open to all citizens. And our colleagues before have said, for example, that most of these public posts were covered by lot, with 2 exceptions actually, the strategy, the generals, where they have to show that they had an expertise in matters military. And in the 4th century, the tamia was more or less, there were more of them, but I think after 315 or something like that, they were consolidated in one, tamias επί των θεωρικών. That was the finance minister. He had also to have expertise, so those were covered by election and not by lot. Okay, so isokratia is this criterion, and in ancient Greece it was fully applied. Anybody could be elected to the highest posts. Eponymous archon, which was more or less the president of the republic, tamias, as we said, the finance minister, generals, and so on. How is it with today's situation? Well, I'm politically interested, and I would like to be the president of the Greek Republic. Can I go and do that? Can I say, I want to be the president of the Greek Republic? The answer is no. Why? Because the president of the Greek Republic is not elected by the citizens, but by the members of parliament. So the post is not open to anybody, or excuse me, to everybody. If we go, for example, a step further to see, for example, how things are in the European Union, how are the things there? I want to be, or Mr. Delacroix wants to be the president of the European Commission. Can he do that? Let's say, I want to be. I'm very good. I know very much about the European Union. I'm a diplomat. I'm a lawyer. I have experience. Can he do that? No, he cannot, because all these posts of the Commissioner, the President, and the members of the Commission are appointed by a compromise, a negotiation between the governments. And the same applies for most of the posts of the European Union, with the exception, of course, of the members of parliament. So there you could see, both in Greece, I suppose in most European countries, and not only, but also at the level of the European Union, that there is a lack of democracy. So if you gave a ranking of 1 for classical Athens, I don't know what a ranking you would give for Greece or for the European Union. Certainly less than 1. Next, isigoria. Isigoria means that everybody or anybody, any citizens can go before the assembly, and I think previous colleagues have explained how these things work, but he can propose on any matter. For example, I am an expert in economics. Let's say I'm Lycurgos of Athens or Nikophon. 4th century, I want to propose a law about the parallel circulation of good currencies in Athens. I go to the Voulie and say, for the next meeting, please put in the agenda my proposal on this and this and this. And these proposals cover everything, foreign relations, economics, religion, everything. So every citizen, any citizen, can go in front of the Voulie, the council, and put his proposal on the agenda. And then, of course, it has to be discussed. He has to propose in front of the assembly what he wants to promote, what his ψήφισμα or law is about, and then it is voted. Do we have a similar procedure in modern times? The answer is, in some countries, yes. In other countries, no. How is it in modern times? In modern times, it is going through the popular initiatives. You have that in Switzerland, you have it partly in Germany, in Austria, I know, but not on all levels, in the United States and so on. How does it go? A popular assembly, let's say, or a popular meeting says, we want to propose a law on this and this and this. They gather signatures. Usually they have to gather 8 to 10% of the signatures of the people who have voted on the same level, community, land, or canton, or state in the United States, or in Uruguay, for example. Also, they have the same system as in Switzerland. Then they go, let's say, to the city hall, if it is something which has to do with the city. Vienna, for example, now has done some of these things. I was in Baden-Baden 2 years ago, and they had a proposal about a bridge, if it should be open to traffic or only to pedestrians. They laid that down, and then after a certain amount of time, they vote. If a proposal goes through, if it gets a majority, then the town hall or the mayor is obliged, and this is the important thing, he is obliged to fulfill the decision of the citizens. And this happens also as more and more in many countries. New Zealand, Canada, Australia, they have these procedures. They have even one more procedure which is related a little bit also to ostracism, which you know, I think, what it is about, which in modern times takes is called recall procedure. Recall procedure is the following. We have elected me as the mayor of Athens, and I will be the mayor of Athens for the next 4 years. But after 1 year, the voters, citizens of Athens, realize that I'm incompetent. It's not a question of legal procedure, not that I have done fraud or whatever, but they realize that I'm incompetent. I don't know, I'm whatever. And they don't like me anymore. They don't have to wait till the end of my term, but they can initiate the same procedure for gathering signatures, saying, we would like to recall Professor Kyriazis from mayor because we don't like him anymore. They don't say that exactly like that, but this is the case. And if the procedure goes through, for example, if after the vote he takes a majority of negative votes in this case, he falls from his authority for his post the next day. And this has happened, for example, in California, that the governor of California, one of the governors of California, has lost his office some years ago through this procedure. And after that I mean, just for information, Schwarzenegger was elected in his place. So this is another procedure which is very democratic. Now, the next one is logodosia, which means yes. Now, before I go to that, the question is how, well, in Athens, again, the ranking would be 1, because all posts were open to all citizens. How is it in modern Greece? Well, I said before, we have no procedure of initiatives, popular initiatives, not at all. In other countries, as we said before, there are, but also limited. For example, in Germany, I think, if I'm not wrong, that it goes to the land level. I think there is no, this procedure, it's not applied to the federal level, if I'm not wrong. And also, it is not applied to financial questions. Questions which have financial repercussions are excluded from this procedure. Why? That's another question. So, if we take really again the ranking, in Greece it would be, in modern Greece it would be 0. In Germany, I don't know how much we would, or in Austria, I don't know what the ranking would give it, but probably not 1, less than 1 because of these exceptions. Next one, logodosia, accountability. And this is a very, very important difference between the ancient Greek, how you say, direct democracies, because we are speaking about direct democracies in comparison to modern ones. Let's say an example, modern one. United Kingdom, they had this famous referendum to exit from the European Union. After some years, they realized that it was a wrong decision. Could they prosecute those who were in favor of the decision, Farage, Johnson, and so on? In Greece, we have a similar case. We had, for example, the politicians who said before 2010 everything is okay and so on. They even manipulated the statistical data to show that we don't have a debt as high as it was, not a deficit as high as it was, and so on. And then we had, as you know, these problems of memoranda and so on. Could I prosecute, go again and say, well, the ex-minister of finance lied to us, and the result was that we had these negative effects? The answer is, for modern times, no. Why? Because in order for me to be able to prosecute him, I have to show the following. I have to show what I had as a negative effect. What did I lose personally? I cannot go, as I show you, I will show you the case of ancient Athens and classical Greece. I cannot just say I am, as a citizen, the protector of the public good, public welfare, and I prosecute for that. I must show what happened. The judges will ask me, okay, perhaps you're right, but what did you lose from this? And I have to show, well, my business has lost I don't know what, and it's very difficult, of course, to prove. What happened in ancient Athens? I'll give you an example of that, which is very, very, I think, important. Every citizen could go in front of the assembly and in front of the courts and say, Mr. So-and-so said in the assembly that my proposal is this and this, and I'll give you an example after that to be sure what we mean about that. But in reality, after that, we have seen that this proposal had not the effects he promised, but negative effects. He is accountable for that. Let him come and defend himself, and if the assembly or the law or the jury of the law court is against him, then he faces fines, exile, or even the death penalty. So this is a full accountability, and it is a full accountability for which is going through by every and any citizen who go and say, I am the protector, as I understand it, of course, of the public welfare. The example, we are at about 340 before Christ. Demosthenes, who is the main orator of Greece, of Athens at the time, perceives that there is a threat from Macedon, Philip, father of Alexander, who is expansionist. He says in front of the assembly, empower me to make a coalition of Greek city-states in order to thwart the attempts of the Macedonians to expand into southern Greece. The assembly said, okay, you're right. They vote him. They give him ambassadorial powers. He does bring about the coalition, and they even offer him a crown due to his services. But unhappily, in 338, at the Battle of Heronia, the Allies lose the battle against the Macedonians. And the Athenians and the others, of course, lose about 1,000 dead. After that, the opponent, the orator who is in opposition to Demosthenes, who is a Aeschines, and who was probably pro-Macedonian, not probably, he was pro-Macedonian. Perhaps they say that he even might have received money from Philip. We don't know that, possibly, but he was pro-Macedonian anyway. And he comes and says, Demosthenes, you promised us that the coalition would thwart the threat of the Macedonians. What was the result? The result was that we lost the battle and 1,000 Athenians were dead, were killed. Come and apologize yourself. There is a prosecution, and the prosecution is called, we know that because there are two famous speeches on the crown, because here Demosthenes received the crown. Demosthenes' apology on the crown is one of the magnificent orations of all time, as you probably know. So Aeschines first accuses him and says what we said before. You promised that and that, but the result was that. So, and what is important is that the fact that the assembly voted for the proposal of the Demosthenes does not exclude him from the prosecution. Because here, Aeschines said, yes, but you misled the assembly. You promised something which was not true. So it doesn't absolve you the fact that the assembly voted your proposal. And Demosthenes makes his apology on the crown, and he convinces the Athenians that although they lost the battle, which is an unforeseen event, he was right on his policy proposal. And he was acquitted. And by the way, also Aeschines was shattered because he lost the case and he left Athens and he never came back. He went to Rhodes and he continued his career in Rhodes. So you see actually the difference of accountability between ancient times and modern times. And if you want to make again the ranking, I suppose in Athens you would give 1, and you choose what you would give to modern regimes. The last one is called isopolitia, and this is a criterion which applies only to federations. Isopolitia means equality of policy, and it was the following. I must make a small detour here and say that the idea and the practice of federation is also a Greek invention, if I may call it like that, which is not very well known. We know, of course, that democracy is a Greek invention, political invention, but also the federation is a Greek invention. And we have already from the 4th and even probably from the 5th century, great federations. In the 4th century, certainly, starting certainly at about 380, 390 before Christ, we have the great Achaean Federation, which is, at the time they were called Kinopolitia, common policy, which covered more or less the whole of the Peloponnese. And the whole of the Peloponnese had more than probably 30 city-states at the time. And the other big federation was the Aetolian. And one of the origins of Mr. Blakopoulos, Messolongi, was part of the Aetolian Federation, which was, after that, it expanded much more and covered even cities from Thessaly. So it was a big federation for the time. And we had also the Boeotian Federation and many others, but those are the 3 more important. What does now isopolitia means? It means, for example, that one citizen of, let's say, Corinth, which was a part of the member city-state of, I must say also these federations were all democratic, and the premise for a new city-state to enter and be a member of the federation was that it should be democratic. So they could, if there was, for example, a city-state which was a tyranny, they had to change the regime in order to be able to be a member of the federation. This happened also. So, Mr. Blachopoulos is a citizen of Messolongi, to take the Aetolian case, and he wants to move and go to another Aetolian federation, for example, in Calydon. And he moves there with his business and so on. What happens now? It happens that his civil rights are transferred from Messolongi to Calydon, fully. So he is a member of the popular assembly of the city of Calydon, fully, because he is a member of the federation. apart also from being able to vote also for the Federation Assembly, which met twice per year. But for the local federation, he has fully citizen rights and economic rights also. He can move his property, buying house, and so on. So here again, you would give probably to the ancient federation the ranking of 1. What happens to today's federation? For example, the European Union. I am a citizen of Greece and I'm living in Germany, but I'm still a citizen of Greece. Can I vote for German elections? No. I can vote for European elections, but not for German elections. Although, and you know, of course, that there is no, in this sense, a legal sense of a European citizenship yet. We are saying we are members of the European Union, but we have also passports which say European Union, but we are not in this case legally citizens of the European Union and then citizens of Greece, Germany, Austria, or whatever. So there again, you see that in ancient Greek federations, the ranking would be 1. In modern federation, European Union would be less. In other federation like the United States, it could probably be also 1. If you move from one state to the other, there is no problem if you show that you have changed your domicile and so on. Now, I go down to the second part of my presentation, which follows from the first one, and which is arguments for direct democracy. And there are a number of them. First, representative governments lead in actual fact to minority governance. Why? Because there is a lot of abstinence of voters. So if you say, for example, in last Greek elections, I think, πόσο ήταν η αποχή, Σπύρο, πόσο? Η αποχή, 40? 60, τόσο πολύ. So Professor Vlachopoulos tells me that during the last elections, the people who didn't vote were 60%. So only 40% voted. And for those 40%, let's say the first party took 28, I think, 30%. So 30% of 40% is a minority of voters. So in this case, not legally, but in actual fact, you have only minority governance, and probably this happens everywhere. So why not empower the people to vote directly for the issues which interest them and leave it to minority governments? Second, representative democracy during recent years in many countries shows that leaders are not, to say it mildly, what they were before. They lack power, they lack vision, or whatever. If this is the case, why not again let the people decide on particular issues? Third, a very important point which is known from economics and from political science, it's the principal agent problem. The principal in this case are the citizens who vote, the parliamentarians, the members of parliament, who are the agent. Agent means that we empower the members of parliament and the government to fulfill what they had promised at the election. But in actual fact, many of the promises, certainly in Greece, but I suppose in all democracies, are not fulfilled. Because the representatives say, well, okay, we cannot do that, or their interests, their personal interests are different, and so on. And this is a very big problem. It is known first from the enterprises, where, let's say, the director of the enterprise, the CEO, sometimes does not take into account the interests of his shareholders, and transferring them to the political area, we have the same problem as I mentioned that before. So if this is the case again, why not let citizens decide themselves? Fourth, economic efficiency. There are a lot of econometric studies, in particular for Switzerland, the United States, and Germany also, which shows that, for example, in Switzerland, they have made studies between cantons which apply a lot of direct procedures in comparison to cantons which do not apply them as much. And they have seen, these econometric studies, that there is a gain of efficiency between 10 to 20% for the cantons which apply direct procedures. direct democracy procedure. And this is understandable also because if we have direct democracy procedures, the control of the politicians who execute that are higher, there is less waste, and there is less fraud. So this is also an economic argument in favor of direct democracy. The fifth argument has to do with cultural achievement. And you can see, for example, from the example of ancient Athens, that the cultural achievements of ancient Athens, in all aspects, monuments, paintings, philosophy, or whatever, were achieved during a time when it was a direct democracy, not during a time when it was a tyranny or during Roman times and so on. Sixth, populism. If the citizens decide themselves about the issues, they learn what is feasible and what is not. They learn from their mistakes about costs and benefits and are less prone to be misled by populist politicians. So this is actually a procedure of learning. If you decide yourself, you bear also the cost yourself. You cannot blame Farage. He misled that, and he said that it's better to go out of the European Union and so on. 7, less corruption, since citizens decide and can monitor their decision, which is an aspect also of the principal agent problem. And last, which is also a very important point, is the disaggregation of choice. What do I mean by that? Let's see how modern citizens decide in a representative democracy. Let's say we have 4 parties, and each party gives us a catalogue of their preferences. If we vote for us, we'll do this and this and this. We'll do this for defense, we'll do this for migration, we'll do this for immigration, we'll do this for education, this for public health, and so on. Now, I'm a citizen, and I take time to study the different proposals. And I say, well, I like the proposal on defense of Party A. I don't like the proposal of Party A on education, but I like the proposal of Party B on education, and I like the proposal of Party C on economics. Can I make this disaggregate choice? No. I have to vote on a catalogue. So I say, okay, if I measure and make weights between these different choices, okay, the nearest it comes is Party A. But it does not fulfill my wishes, expectations, and so on fully. In a direct democracy, you do something else. You vote by case by case. So we begin. Ancient Greece. Defense. What should we do, says Themistocles, 482 before Christ, in order to defend against the new Persian invasion, which culminated in Salamis, as you know. Themistocles proposes we should use the money of the silver mines of Salamis in order to finance the fleet. Aristides probably says, no, we should distribute the money, 10 drachmas for each citizen, to each citizen. So 10 drachmas more or less half a monthly salary of a technician working in the Acropolis or whatever. So it was not a negligible sum. So here what we have for this particular issue, we have either defense or public or private consumption. And this is a very particular choice for the particular issue. And happily, Themistocles won the argument, so they built a field. So we have choice, case by case. And this actually, what does it do? It maximizes the personal welfare of its citizen, which is not maximized when you have the choice under catalogue under representative democracy. And this also maximizes total welfare. I think those were my arguments, and I hope that it was a little bit provocative, and I hope that we'll have some questions, comments, and so on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Kyriazis, for this defense of direct democracy. Now we can move on with the next speech, and then we will have a discussion for both speeches together. Professor Dr. Peter Alexis Albrecht will speak about autonomy, immediacy, and participation. Keywords on the crisis of representative democracy. Professor Albrecht studied law and social sciences in Göttingen. From 1977 to 1991, he researched and taught at the universities of Munich, where he also completed his habilitation, and Bielefeld, where he held the chair of criminology and criminal law. And in 1991, he moved to the University of Frankfurt, where he held the professorship for criminology and criminal law at the Institute for Criminal Science and Legal Philosophy. From 1995 to 1997, he served as the Dean of the Faculty of Law, and he has been the managing co-editor of the Critical Quarterly for Legislation and Legal Studies. In 2004, he was awarded the Federal Republic of Germany's Order of Merit for his many years of social commitment. And he has also been awarded the title of Honorary Professor at the Odessa National Naval University in Ukraine, as well as an honorary doctorate from another university in Ukraine, the Mudry National Law University. In Kharkiv, exactly. Professor Albrecht.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yes. First of all, I would like to say some thanks, that's quickly, because it's my own impression and not the impression of you all that comes later. But it was a pleasure for me to listen to Mr. Barata and to all the other specialists of ancient history, because that was for me partly new and partly it was a very big effort for my thinking. Thank you for this. And by this way, I thank too Mr. Faux de la Croix, who is an excellent president for an audium like this, who organizes all the things, yes, later, and you do it, who organize all the things, who complete the personal condition here, and he is very famous to make an interdisciplinary approach of lawyers and politicians. That's important for this theme, and so I had said, yes, I come, because this is for me the first thing, because I'm not only a lawyer, I studied social science, and I have the two positions which I can see, and it's not easy to have this when I together with lawyers, they say, this is a science politician, a guy. And when I'm with the other ones, they say, that's a lawyer. And so I have no direct contact to the base. I'm always between this. Okay. Now I would like to give you two topics I want to speak about. The first is the historical basis of ethic direct democracy. That's not to say something about from me, because I've learned here. But what is important, this is the advantages and disadvantages, opportunities and risks of direct democracy. This is the first of all. And second one, I have personal things to say, because I was not a victim, but I was engaged in several, or in two practical organizations where we tried to make better positions for politicians, and never heard again from this. As a scientific, we live about this and we can live about this, but that's not the question for me. The question is, why is it like this? So first of all, the living conditions, autonomy, immediacy, and participation. Those were my three topics, and from these three terms, autonomy, I will not repeat it, a starting point. This is the starting point and focus can be derived from the primary 150-year history of Attic democracy in the 5th century. The central principles of direct democracy, it was an almost unattainable goal throughout human history. Comprehensive sovereignty of the people on the basis of institutional and individual self-determination. I can repeat, institutional and personal. It's not to discuss without one of the others. And the question is, when I have this topic, and I'm very proud to be here with you, because I think here were the roots of the progress in democracy in Athens. And you should be proud, the Athens colleagues, to be in this position, because in other countries we don't have these experiences, and so you live with this, and so it's I think a very good opportunity for us to listen about your now what we have heard today comparison from yesterday and tomorrow, or today. Tomorrow that will I explain now in some words. So what remains for the principle of direct democracy in the face of this? The Attic history of democracy cannot be used as a model for possible reforms for today's democracy. I think this should be clear. According to the historical sources, it was essentially principles, that is my term, principles, not relevances, principles, after Dworkin, an American sociologist, admires the word principles, and I have learned it, but I think this is my position too. Although it was essential principles that characterized the direct democracy of that time. The core element was a form of government in which power has exercised directly by the people in referendums, without representatives and representative transmission mechanisms. It is the form of grassroots democracy, I would say. And now my question will be, does it still exist anywhere in the world? You have mentioned sometimes now all the countries you know. You are a professor in all the countries, congratulations. But I would like to concrete it with Switzerland today. I like Switzerland because, I can explain it why I like it. That is a subjective profession. What remains in Switzerland? Yes, it does. Switzerland, based on the same principle of popular sovereignty, albeit with contemporary adaptations. Nothing comes closer to the Attic principle of immediacy than the living example of Switzerland. It has the most far-reaching direct democratic elements of all democracies. Switzerland has these instruments at all political levels: municipal, cantonal, federal. You spoke about this. The specific form it takes differs greatly between the political levels and between the individual cantons. There are usually four weekends per year. At the federal level, the constitution determines what is subject to mandatory and optional referendums. Other popular voting procedures, it's a three things. Other popular voting procedures are direct democratic instruments in which a proposal is developed by the people themselves. And I can continue. There's two possibilities: a bottom-up approach, a bottom-up that comes from down and goes higher, and the other one, you spoke about this, is the top-to-down. That is worse. This is not the best because it's mostly an instrument for governments. They are decided by the people in a direct vote. This is very important in Switzerland. In 26 cantons of Switzerland, the European Union, there has 27 countries, the European Union, Switzerland 26. Why not copy it? But it's only a joke. The cantonal constitutions determine what must be put before the people. It comes cantons, there is a obligatory referendum in laws, which means that all proposed laws must be approved by the people there. In cities and municipalities, the population often decides on the budgets themselves. Many municipalities do not have a municipal parliament. In this case, the voting population itself carries out the legislative work in a municipal assembly. Many offices, such as courts, school authorities and district authorities, and to some extent primary school teachers, are also elected directly by the people. That's a short overview. And now I would like to present you a modern German book from the author Lübbe Wolf, Gertrude Lübbe Wolf. I don't know if you have heard this. Lübbe Wolf was in Bielefeld. It was my university too. A professor, and later on she was in the Federal Constitutional Court. She offers a consideration of the opportunities and risks of democracy. Very good mixed, like you did now. Yeah, how is it? And I would like to present you the 10 cliches which she presented, and she tried to say these are only cliches and nothing more. The first of it: the people are too stupid for factual decisions. She has pronounced it popular with his direct speeches. This is page 19 to 28. I would like to present you because I could show that this type of scientific production is a good thing to lead over to the future. Alors, the people are too stupid for factual decisions. The voter is trusted with the election of representatives, but not with factual decisions. But what is the difference? Research confirmed evaluating parties or politicians in terms of their competence is often more difficult than practicing a factual decision. The Swiss express less insight in personal elections than in factual decisions. A positive correlation has been established between direct democratic participation and greater life satisfaction. It's very important. Participation competence leads to more trust in representatives and institutions and to greater satisfaction. Yesterday we heard about the topic of learning, and this is, I think, a very important point. Furthermore, participation in substantive issues increases civic competence. So all that makes a supposedly stupid wiser after all. Makes a stupid wiser after all. And by this, you could say the cliche of voters' greatest stupidity can be refuted. Second, direct democracy favors demagogues. In the post-war period in Germany, the political articulated aversion to direct democracy promoted the self-exoneration of the elites. It was not they who had failed, people thought, but the common people who had brought Hitler to power. However, Hitler's seizure of power in Germany was not the result of the people's plebiscitary powers, but rather the cause was the right of the Reichspräsident to dissolve parliament. That was a very bad instrument in those times. This enabled the dictatorship of national socialists, in which even plebiscites were practiced, such as the withdrawal from the League of Nations, the liberation of the Rhineland, and the Anschluss with Austria. Your point. Austria. However, the instrument of the plebiscite was only a top-down procedure that served the government's own political self-determination. It was only seemingly a direct democratic competence for the people, which makes one thing clear: the design of direct democracy competences always triggers very different mechanisms of action. For example, top-down and is weaker, but bottom-up is stronger. That you have always to see the procedures of all these direct democratic things. You have always take it in your eye. Third, above all, when it comes to financial issues, the people are not to be trusted. It's a third argument for the cliché which people pronounce against direct democracy. In 6 European countries, direct democratic procedures are excluded from budgetary and tax law. In German state constitutions, this is complete. But why should the representatives be trusted more? Election gifts and the servicing of clienteles is a rule and discredits the representatives in Switzerland and in some states of the United States, where the following result is overwhelming prevalent. Government spending and government debt are significantly lower, where direct democracy decisions are also possible with regard to public finance. In 2001, the Swiss even approved the federal resolution on the constitutional debt brake with 84.7%. The cliché is refuted, so the electorate is better at handling finances. Fourth, the people will make ignoble decisions, right-wing, conservative, or left-wing. Catastrophe is coming to society with direct democracy. The arguments from Löwe-Wolf, this is also refuted by reality. Between 1977 and 1984, there were 153 referendums by the people in the United States. 74 conservative, 79 rather progressive. So everything was very balanced. Popular initiatives and popular referendums against parliamentary are regularly rejected in Switzerland. Seen positively, these indirect efforts counteract the zeal for reform. The legislator is slowed down. Nevertheless, innovations cost more time in direct democracy decision making. This goes no too quickly, as you could think. This lapse of time, however, promotes greater acceptance of decisions by the population. Fifth, direct democracy is antisocial. This argument refers to the low voter turnout among people in low incomes. It is true that the willingness and ability to use direct democracy decisions is unevenly distributed. However, this dilemma can be resolved primarily by improving the educational opportunities of the population. These can be promoted, for example, by direct democracy procedures. The validity of referendums in Switzerland is improved by the fact that there is no quorum for participation and approval. This is in contrast to Italy, Eastern Europe, and other countries where the participation, you spoke about this, is combined with a quorum and is a major break for this type of democracy. What follows from this? There's no such thing as the direct democracy. There are different forms of direct democracy. The United States and also Germany stand out negatively in this respect. Direct democracy has also different effects on the effectiveness and efficiency of public spending. Both are higher in direct democracy decision-making options. In Switzerland, for example, tax compliance is higher. Worldwide income inequality is also lower in states with direct democracy methods. Direct democracy is also not a procedure of processes of economic liberalization and privatization, what you can thought or think. In Switzerland, direct democracy has even slowed the dismantling of the welfare state. According to research, higher satisfaction is measured the lower the income. It's measured the lower the income. This cliché on unsocial direct democracy can also be dismissed. 6. That goes quickly now. Yes or no decisions are too simplistic and do not encourage this compromise. It's a cliché. The effects of yes or no decisions always depend on the design of the procedure. In Switzerland, counter-proposals can always be submitted in response to popular initiatives. These are set to the better than representative mediation procedures. In Switzerland, objections can also be raised against popular legislation, which often leads to change in state legislation. Referendums also often lead to compromises. In representative democracy, on the other hand, the strict dualism of government and opposition eludes the path of compromise. The cliché of the harmful yes-no in direct democracy can therefore be refuted. 7, direct democracy endangers minorities. Always heard this problem. Wolf presents the presumed endangerment of minorities in direct democracy is refuted by Swiss studies between 1990 and 2015. Of a total of 22 proposals that were directly against the interests of minorities, only 9 cases were successful in Switzerland. The majority voted in favor of rejecting such proposals in 13 cases. And of 17 proposals that explicitly spoke in favor of endangering minority rights, only 4 were adopted, while 13 were unsuccessful. However, the strongest protection for endangered minorities lies in the normative breaks, and I'm glad to be a member of a law faculty because this is our best argument for the direct democracy. And the normative breaks in the constitutional states in favor of consistent minority protection. These are fundamental rights, constitutional rules of safeguarding opposition rights, constitutional jurisdiction in Germany or protection methods in Switzerland through the federal court there. They have no constitutional court in Switzerland, but they have a federal court who takes these methods within. Functioning constitutional courts, international law in Europe, European law in the European Union, European Convention on Human Rights in 46 countries for human rights, and European Charter of Fundamental Rights. These all juristical elements are a real break against the thing that the direct democracy endangers minorities, in the opinion of Mrs. of our colleague. The strongest protection for endangered minorities lies, as I said. This catalogue differs greatly from country to country in its legal enforceability. In judicial systems with an institutionality secured third power, it has a more projective effect than in judicial systems that are controlled by the executive. B, that is, it may, the cliché that direct democracy endangers minorities has been refuted empirically and by the plurality of legal remedies. Due to time constraints, I will summarize the last 3 points. Direct democracy is only suitable for small units, like Switzerland, very small, you can't see it. The 8th, direct democracy does not go well with representative democracy. That is good. The most, she says this is the most blatant case of generalization error. According to Wolf, it is a fear of the modern large state and mass democracy to say we only need small countries for this. And since the Etiquette principle of self-determination is a central point of direct democracy, this objection is correct from the point of view of direct democracy as well as from the point of view of representative democracy. One should therefore rely on direct democracy. We had 9. The 11th as a stance position is very good because she summarized it. The negation of all cliches, which Wolf does not explicitly emphasize but only cautiously weights, is to conclude with her last these. There is a lack of responsibility in direct democracy. There's a lack of responsibility in direct democracy, the 10th cliche. She gets to the heart of the matter. And now I cite her. She says, The most effective form of responsibility is to have to face the music for the mess you've made yourself. That is precisely the case with the direct democracy decisions. The soup you've made yourself doesn't taste quite as bad as when you are in doubt as when others, such as elected politicians, have made it. That is the end of her very interesting book. I can only suggest to read this, Liebe Wolf, as a very, very close to parliamentary things, and as a former member of the court. To sum up, the main reasons for allowing direct democratic decisions are the follows, the centrals. To sum up, first, more direct self-determination. It's very important. More direct self-determination. Second, a positive contribution to political education and judgment of the population. That's we heard yesterday about learning theories. Third, a stronger orientation towards the voter interests and stronger factual persuasion for the respective policy. The suppression of party political self-interest and the self-interest of political representatives. And last, the consequently increased satisfaction with the political system, also in its representative democratic parts, which leads to the increased trust in democracy. This is her sum up. And now I will close with two personal things I have learned in my life as what can I say, as a scientific person who always works together with executive persons. Sometimes it makes fun, but mostly it's bad. From my own practical scientific experience, I can prove the failure of representative democracy in jurisprudential contexts. That goes quickly, but it must be said. It is evident at the social system and organizational level in the lack of institutional autonomy in the German judicial system and in the penal system. First is lack of autonomy in the German judicial system. From 2011 to 2014, I was the scientific moderator, of a commission of justice officials from several German federal states. The commission was established at the suggestion of the Federal Ministry of Justice. Its purpose was to educate the German administration of justice and the judiciary about the autonomy of the third power in Europe. That was the claim. The judiciary about the autonomy of the third power in Europe. Judges from 4 countries, including Switzerland, were had as aspects entitled Autonomy for a Third Power in Europe, a transfer task for an enlightened society of reason. So the bilingual report was published in 2018 by the Berliner Wissenschaftsverlag in 874 pages. The personal independence of German judges is guaranteed by the Constitution, the personal independence. But what use is mere individual independence if the conditions under which justice is to be administered are predetermined in detail by the powerful executive branch? That is the point. The judge can judge what he wants, but the paper he needs is ordered by the administrative, by the executive. I've made it in one small sentence, my big sentence here. Because the executive power selects and appoints judges and consistently defends this power. The third power of government in Germany is merely an executive-controlled indirect third power. The so-called judicial selection committees of the parliaments in not all German federal states merely execute the personal decisions of the Minister of Justice, like this. If they are rejected by appointed and only a handful of parliamentarians, 4 or 5 people, parliament, the ministry submits a new proposal. The same procedure over and over again. This is a clear shame, autonomy of the judicial system, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the whole delegation of experts. In the same procedure over a clear shame that I said. 24 EU, also countries of European Union, strive for international autonomy. They strike for international autonomy, institutional autonomy, excuse me. Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic do not. And the others, they do. The report left little room for arguments regarding the institutional autonomy of the third power. The major judges associations demanded in the report and in public the necessary establishment of institutional autonomy of the third power. However, the report disappeared without any chances to the German judicial system and the cabinets of the civil managers of the representative democracy. Second, human dignity is a constitutional claim in the German penal system. That was my second approach, to make better conditions for some people who are close to me as a professor for criminal law. I have more friends there as in the judiciary, I must say, in my life. It's not a joke, that's really. In the 1990s, I was chairman of two commissions that had the task to submitting reforms for the critical state of the German penal system to the state government of Lower Saxony and Hessen. The commission, composed of an equal number of members from the police, judiciary, and prison system, identified serious deficiencies in the execution of custodial sentences, especially in the case of long-term placements. The commissions developed and examined constitutional indicators for institutional security in prisons. In particular, the focus was on social security to safeguard human rights and to create conditions for the social integration of prisoners. The starting point for both commissions was human rights apply for their own sake, are prescribed by a law and require concretization. They may only be subject to a power-divided, not power-entangled judiciary. This is a big problem in Germany because in the Grundgesetz we have the power balance, and the praxis make not the power balance, they make an entangled judiciary. They say the powers are all together, and so we are together too. Huh? And you can't work with this as a lawyer. What are the reasons now for this political passivity? This goes quickly. The core problem lies in the short-term orientation of representative democracy. The short-term orientation of representative democracy. 4-year periods are too short for important structural changes in society and for major socio-political reforms. And the executive power yields to this pressure, with a largely due to the demands for short-term decision-making leeway on the part of the legislative representatives. After all, elected politicians want to be re-elected. This results in a general orientation towards the next election date. Severe financial turbulences that require structural changes are always avoided in a flexible way, because everything that is sensible needs time for development and testing, but not the pressing constraints of 4-year election periods. No elected representative in a representative democracy can, as in Switzerland, return the responsibility for wrong decisions to the electorate. Direct democratic corrections by the electorate do not exist for them in Germany. Those elected for a short term must foot the bill alone if they are voted out of office. You explained this. Things don't go any faster in direct democracy that you have to think about. Often, they go even slower because all citizens have to be informed factually and motivated to vote in a direct democratic way. But there, the electorate can confront the problems directly through popular initiatives and popular voting procedures. This not only reduces the shifting of blame and the shame onto the few representatives, but also the political trend in the representative system to massively underwrite structural problems in short election periods. So Löbe Wolf in her conclusions. For both legal problems areas, the only hope of realization remains in distant, direct, democratic implementation. And my last words, why not try direct democracy in Europe as a whole? Reasons. First, we have the best sign here of the grassroots of democracy in your country, and you gave us the best overview for the pro and cons. Second, the practice of direct democracy in Switzerland. So I have reported. Third, scientific sources and their advantages over direct democracy as evaluated in current research. These three things and the reasons therefore. And Europe's last chance, in my view, the direct democratic path to eternal peace, I say to this. I am going one step further. The Europe-wide implementation of direct democracy should be given priority as a political program. This would be particularly attractive to young Europeans, for the young ones. It is their future that is at stake. It would be separate, internally effective and lived pattern of interpretation of our common Europe culture and history. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Albrecht. Now we move on with the discussion about these two speeches. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I would like to take advantage of my position and state a question to both of you. We have all great respect, of course, for direct democracy, and I also understand the point about the educational function of direct democracy. Through direct democracy, the people learn, as Professor Kyriazis explained, to take better decisions or to avoid new mistakes because they have to face the music of their own mess, as Professor Albrecht explained us. But what happens till we learn? Is there a transition period? Unfortunately, here in Greece, we had the experience in 2015 to almost be completely destroyed because of a decision of direct democracy. The referendum about the program of the memorandum of the International Monetary Fund, who offered us some money with the offer also to take very strict measures, was rejected by the referendum. And so it was the elected representatives who finally saved Greece from the decision taken through direct democracy. So the question is it worth to take the risk to destroy ourselves in order to learn how to improve ourselves through direct democracy?
Okay, please.
In my eyes, I am not a politician. I am a scientific person, and we have made all these pro and cons, and so the politicians can discuss it. I think the work of the Löbe Wolf book, the Löbe Wolf book, gives so many best reasons for integrate or to implement direct democracy that it must doubt for all politicians to read it before they discuss.
Thank you. Well, before answering directly your question, I would like to, taking also advantage of Professor Albrecht before, there is a very crucial argument, I think, about direct democracy, which is also an argument counter these arguments you mentioned before, which are against direct democracy. And the argument is the following: democracy is either full or not existent. So you cannot say, okay, I trust the people, the citizens, to vote for the representatives, but I don't trust them to vote for issues which are crucial to them. This is a contradiction. Either you trust them fully or you don't trust them at all. Why should they be able to vote for representatives and they say, okay, we believe that they vote correctly? That's the argument of representative democracy, but we don't trust them to vote for their particular interests, either at the city level or country level or land level and so on. This is the first thing. Now, concerning your specific point, I think that the main argument and the main issue here is that for direct democracy to function, you should have a learning process. You cannot go just once. We had the previous referendum in Greece, as you remember, was just in 1974 or 75, if we should have a kingdom, if we should be a kingdom or not. So you cannot just go to the people every 50 years and tell them, okay, now vote for this. And the second argument also is that the referendum was from, as Professor Albert said, from not bottom up, as it is in direct democracy initiatives, but top down. And in particular, it was very, we have written even an article about that, it was very badly drafted. So most of the people did not understand what they were voting for. And this is the main argument. So if you don't understand what it is about, and it really was very badly drafted, even, I mean, in the sequence of yes or no, the no was before the yes and not in parallel. So people reading say, oh, okay, they read first 9, no, and then yes. This is also somehow misleading, but it was so badly drafted that most of the people, even, I mean, people who are educated, even economists and so on, did not understand what they were voting for. And they were voting actually about the Juncker proposals of the memorandum, but most people thought they were voting in favor or against the government, in favor or against the European Monetary Union, in favor or against even the European Union. So it was a total confusion. And of course, if you have a total confusion, then of course the result is also what would be, what you would expect. And further to that, I mean, there was also propaganda by many politicians, even the government at the time, which was Syriza, which were against, vote against. Why? Because if you vote against, we will have a stronger position to negotiate with the European Union and the International Monetary Fund, which was, of course, nonsense. I think those are the arguments in answer to your particular question.
Yes, Professor Nidaru Merlin.
But I think I should use the microphone in order to be heard from everybody. Well, in fact, that's a very interesting discussion. And in my talk, I don't know whether you already were here yesterday. As a political theorist, you're an economist, you're a lawyer, as a political theorist, I developed some arguments that run or seem to run against direct democracy. Well, it's not so easy. I'm in favor of elements of direct democracy, but I'm against the substitution of representative democracy with all its institutional formats that are established by direct democracy. You totally left out the dimension of digital transformation. Now we have the means to realize direct democracy. And I think it's useful to think about what this would mean. And one of the elements of or central elements that are important here is, I tried to delineate it in only a few sentences, is that we have a formal, logically proven argument that shows that direct democracy in a perfectly realized, that means everybody can come with his or her proposal. Every proposal can be discussed and decided on among all citizens with logical necessity. With logical necessity leads to a complete chaos. And it is because we get cyclic collective preferences. This is not just an intuition like Liber Wolf maybe have. This is a logical proof by Kenneth Arrow. Yeah, you know him probably. And this shows that using digital tools like liquid democracy, there are many others, but this is the most well-known, would result in a blockade of political decision. Now again, I'm not against direct democracy. I live in a land that uses this tool, and it uses quite well, I think, in the cities, Bürgerentscheid, and in the land as a certain means to intervene into the political process, but not as a substitution. The argument, well, look to Switzerland, it works more or less. Well, it works because you have many procedures that result in, how do you call this, in Verlangsamung, you are in slowing down the decidural processes. So it takes a while till the decision is taken. So if you use liquid democracy, you decide in the evening. You have a proposal, and you can decide in the evening amongst citizens. Required that a certain amount of citizens participates in it every evening. Yeah? But then you can do it. And then you would have this problem. Now, one final remark. I think it's very interesting. This is also institutional and juridical topic. To look more precisely to the procedures established in representative democracies, separation of state powers and so on and so forth, that avoid the error problem, that avoid this problem. For example, in the German system, you don't have usually more than two alternatives, even in choosing the chancellor. You have only at most two. Yeah? Konstruktives Misstrauensvotum, as it is called in the German constitution, avoids that you have more alternatives. So either this one is elected or the other one remains in power. Brandt remained in power because the other one was not elected. So this makes sure that the error problem doesn't show up. You don't see it, so to say, because you usually have only two factions. The one faction is composed by several parties in the meantime. This is the basis of the government by a certain contract, and the other faction in a way is the opposition who is against it. So it's very simplified, but this is more or less the system. And this has a good rationale behind it. So if you give this rationale up, the stability of democratic decisions would end. Yeah, I'm convinced.
Please.
Professor Bata, maybe, I don't know if it's long enough. I'm afraid you have to approach.
I just want to remember
okay.
on an antique tool in this question, because in antique times they knew a position, a meaning of, I prefer the German expression, gemischte Verfassung, mixture of constitution, and it means my ability for regulatory Yes, could you understand it? In in antique times, there existed a position. So, please hold it.
Yes. Scientifics.
Yeah, sorry for that. I just wanted to remember on a tool of antique times, the antique philosophers, for example, preferred a position which is in German gemischte Verfassung, a mixture of constitution. And it means nothing else as to have elements of both contradicted positions in democracy. For example, I give you one example. I think it would be necessary in democratic systems to bring some parts of the society to the people. I, for myself, made um, a, a possibility for the flats in Vienna. You know, Vienna has a lot of public flats, and I made a work of for 450,000 flats to give the people the possibility to decide, shall we renovate now or later, and how do we take with this or that? And this would be a possibility of direct democracy, which makes sense, of course, because the people have the feeling, so we have something to say, and we live here, and we want to have the the decision. There are some other fields which would work in the same of the same way. For example, the school system has many questions where people could decide, yes, and other things too. For example, I think also a foundation of represented democracy is necessary, yes, but a part of rooted fields should be given to the people back. Especially a big problem of the time are the mediums, you know. And so we could think also to give some parts of decisions back to the people. Just I wanted to remember especially for the antique tool of the mixed constitution. Thank you.
Tja, my job is not to help politicians to make a better republic. I only can bring you two arguments. The elections in the eastern parts of Germany had now 30% of the AfD, that means Alternative for Germany. People say they are extremely right, yeah, on the right. 30%. And 40 or 30% didn't go to the election. When you see 30% AfD, 30 don't go to elections, you have the majority of the people who are not, who don't accept the system which exists. And so it must be for politicians an alarm clock to say we must do something, but not that the scientific people who care for this gives the politicians the proposal to do. I have shown you two extreme important things that not only scientists, also the people of judiciary, of police, and so on, had given those principles to realize, and nothing was there. Nothing was there. It's too short term that politicians who are representatives has to change the conditions. And when this is the case, we must must think about what we can do. I would say that is not my. You said you wasn't politician, no? You had been, and you are out of the play. God be thank. God be thank, or what? Yeah, 5 years. And perhaps you can help me. I only can say this in German. In Germany, I am not a friend of such symposiums. But now you help me, yes? Wenn man einen Sumpf austrocknen will,
If you want to dry out a swamp,
dann darf man das nicht mit den Fröschen besprechen.
you can't discuss it with frogs.
You have understood?
But watch out, the Greeks are frogs. You remember, they are Platons, so they are sitting around the Mediterranean like around a pond. So be careful about the frogs.
Naja, then I can say when you will. Naja, this is my bad.
Thank you. Okay, Professor Niederrümelin, you raised a lot of questions, and I'll try to answer them in very short time. First of all, cyclical preferences. Behind that is a very technical thing which economists know. I don't know if non-economists are very familiar with that. It's the Arrow's impossibility theorem. That's probably what you had in mind. I believe, and we have written a paper on that, that if you go in the way of the ancient assembly procedure and vote case by case, you solve the problem. Because then you don't have any more cyclical preferences. You go from down to build a welfare function. Anyway, this is technical, but I just wanted to mention it. And then you get a total welfare function where you don't have any more cyclical difference because you vote case by case. And this is also the argument you said before that there are two alternatives. Yes, and that's exactly the point, that we have alternatives case by case. This is the important, not on a total, like in representative democracies, but each issue separately. And also concerning what you said, I didn't mention before, but I think the lawyers know that, the Condorcet jury theorem, for example, which is also something which is in favor of what we are saying in favor of direct democracy procedures. And another question which we didn't raise, but I think it's very important, and probably you have heard about that, the Melbourne experiment, where in Melbourne some years ago, the city entrusted a group of citizens chosen randomly to make proposals on the city's finances and alternatives, what they should do and so on, and which were very, very good, and they went forward. The city adopted most of the proposals, and they were very favorable. And this is something which has happened in many countries, even surprisingly in emerging countries like Brazil, for example. So this is a procedure also which is going on, which is a procedure of direct democracy concerning even financial things, and it seems to be working. This is a very big issue, but just a few, or should I say, a few indications. Thank you.
Do you want a comment or a comment?
Well, first, a sort of interim remark. It is simply a great experience to see how much competence on the relationship between ancient and modern democracy we find here in Athens. And in the, between the lawyers, yes, and also between the economists. That's an enrichment for us and something which I think we should keep in mind, yes. This is a competence which has been either never existed or it has been lost in Germany and which we must re-establish. So that is, I think, one sort of interim remark on our proceedings. I have one comment on the I think Professor Vlachopoulos said, Aristotle said, elections produce oligarchy. Well, yeah, this is exactly that problem. But I think probably any system will be a mixture between democracy and oligarchy. The question is only how much influence do the oligarchs have and how much is democracy? Yes? And in my opinion, democracy, the perfect democracy, the one mark democracy is a concrete utopia, which is difficult to reach, but must be our aim. Now, I do have a question to Professor Albrecht. Can you please get me to Switzerland? Because that seems to be, my daughter is already there. If you can get me to Switzerland, that's fine, but please double my pension before I go there. Yes?
I give you some money.
Please, can I have that in writing? And but if we cannot all go to Switzerland with a tradition of 500 years, I mean, how long ago was Rütlischwur? 500 years, yes, roughly speaking. You see, it takes 500 years to get there, to fulfill the prerequisites for that. Yes. So if we can't all go to Switzerland, can Switzerland come to us? And how long would that take in terms of education? So we do have these very dire experiences of Brexit. We have the experience of the French rejection of the European Constitution because they wanted to punish the government. They never thought about the European dimension. We have things like in Berlin, like a vote on the usage of the Tempelhof airport, which means that the Res Publica, the public wealth was completely neglected in favor of particular interests, yes, because people wanted to keep it as a playground for skateboards, etc. So the needs of the rest of the population were completely neglected. And I think you said, direct democracy is a wonderful way to balance out interests. Well, I would say bad enough. I mean, I don't want democracy to be a balance of particular interests. I don't think we should have an Interessenrepublik Deutschland, but a republic where the public wealth, I said it quite often by now, is in the foreground. And as long as people have their personal interests in mind rather than the public interest, I would be rather skeptical. So please get me to Switzerland, this would be my question. But I'm not, as you said in our intermission, I'm not an enemy of direct democracy. I want more democracy, and let us indeed consider in detail which subjects and how more democracy can be introduced. Digital democracy, well, yes, I mean, fine, but has the digitalism produced anything good in terms of democratic process? I think it's rather, up to now, it is rather detrimental to democracy. And people are losing, there are no more public spaces, Professor Dengelmann. Yes, it's an anti-public space. And keep in mind who has the control of the digital economy. It's not the people. The first thing in order to have a digital democracy is the control of the people of digitalism. Yes, I must read your book about it, which I haven't. But probably, yes, as long as capitalists, monopolists have the control of digitalism, we can't hand over our democracy to them. That should be said. So I think we learn, and there are other things in political culture. I'm thinking a lot of that responsiveness of both our deputies, parliament, and also bureaucracy, also about science. That is another issue. There are other issues linked to more democracy. So, but I think we are in a learning process, and the value, and you are adding, there's a lot of added value in what our Greek colleagues have to bring to bear in our discussions. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, also for the compliments about Greek expertise. Frogs are doing quite well, better than one might think. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, we have some more time left. Yes.
In my opinion, we have to distinguish between two kinds of direct democracy. On the one hand, we have a government or a parliament or whoever who gives a question in front of the demos, in front of the people, and they have to vote yes or no. On the other hand, and this is the Irish example and also the ancient Athenian example, we have an assembly, a group of people who is discussing and then is voting. And in my opinion, the second type is, of course, the better one, because as you said, the Greek example and also the Brexit example is even the same. When after the vote was over, the people said, oh, we have been lied at. They lied about the costs of the European Union in the British case, for example, or you said that the referendum was badly formulated. So this could be in a kind of prevented by discussing first and getting at a good formulated alternative and then to vote. So this would be a way to lose the problems going with direct democracy in a way.
May I just make a comment on what our colleague said? I think, yes, you're perfectly right. And what happened in ancient Athens is exactly that before each proposal, and we mentioned that also the other colleagues, there was a discussion. That's why it was put before in the agenda. Point one, Themistocles' proposal on defense. And then Themistocles would have to put forward his arguments, and Aristides, his opponent, has to put also forward his argument. And only after listening to the discussion, which usually took a long time, or the case Demosthenes and Aeschines I mentioned before, only then they were voting. Perhaps the problem is how do we transfer this experience in modern times? And this is perhaps a question of if digitalism could help us in that, so that we have at least a digital discussion before the referendum. Because, of course, well, in Athens it was easy to have it at the PNIX, I don't know, 6,000 or 10,000 people, citizens going there. The quorum was 6,000 actually. And listening and then voting. I mean, in today's big states, it's relatively difficult, even for a city like Vienna, you mentioned before, of 2 or 3 millions assembling somewhere and voting. But perhaps electronically, discussion through the mass media and so on, yes, we could. Thank you.
Because would you nationalize TikTok first, and then we could talk about it? Yes.
Well, only to avoid misunderstandings, 3 short remarks. The first is, unfortunately, this does not work. I don't say more about it. One could think that the error theorem is solved by exactly this method. It's wrong. And who wants to read it, I wrote a book on Logik kollektiver Entscheidungen. This is the title, and you can read German, so there's some chapters about it, Logik kollektiver Entscheidungen. This is the more formal mathematical analysis, and then a more political one 2 or 3 years ago about die gefährdete Rationalität der Demokratie. This is 2020, I think. So there you have the more political implications. Second remark, this is a misunderstanding. I did not argue in favor of giving democracy to the big 5 in the Silicon Valley or something like that. I argued if we take the ideal of direct democracy seriously, then we should take into account the option to use digital tools in order to realize it. You see, this is a whole different point. So Rousseau had the idea of a direct democracy. Only direct democracy can work. This is the Republican ideal of Rousseau. Maybe this is what you have in mind or others have in mind if you talk of direct democracy. And the usual argument is it can't work. How can we have ever an assembly of 60 million Germans, for example? This assembly is not possible. So we have to choose or opt for a form of representative democracy. this argument against direct democracy doesn't hold any longer. It is possible, and it's simply possible, to realize direct democracy via digital tools without the big five of the Silicon Valley. I mentioned one software system. This is liquid democracy. There are some others. Liquid democracy was applied by a left-wing political movement in Italy, and this is Cinque Stelle, and it was used by the Piratenpartei in Germany. In both cases, it ended in chaos. So, to be sure, the arrow theorem was showed in practice, so to say. Even the Piratenpartei doesn't use it anymore. So, just not to have this misunderstanding. It's about using digital tools in order to realize the ideal of democracy. And last remark, I am in favor of more direct democracy. You can read it on the Kerber page, Kerber Foundation page. This is the third study. This is published there on the website. What can we strengthen democracy using digital options? And I opt in favor of and strengthening direct democracy, also in using digital options. So this is not a controversy. I don't say that the substitution of representative democracy by direct democracy cannot work. This is thesis. The complementary role of elements of direct democracy is good. The substitution is bad, so to say. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for your second comment. I think, unfortunately, for some reason this is not working, but that's not a big problem because it's time for lunch. So we have our lunch break exactly on time till 2:30. Thank you very much for your
Ich gebe Ihnen meine Karte.
Ja.
Möchten wir in Kontakt bleiben?
Ja, das ist doch schön.
Haben Sie auch eine? Oder?
Nee, ich habe keine Karten, aber
Ah.
das gehört bei mir zur
Moment.
Lebenseinstellung.
Sie können da.
sehr interessant. Θερμά συγχαρητήρια.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Schreiben Sie hier, wenn Sie wollen,
Ja,
Ihre,
Mhm.
wie heißt das?
Meine
E-Mail.
E-Mail.
Yes.
Peter. Alexis Klein, ne? Naja, Alexis